What's up, guys? I'm gonna teach you a quick little lesson here about polynomials, and we're gonna add and subtract them today, and just kind of classify them as well. But um, basically, just a quick little lesson. And it's pretty easy stuff. Basically, boils down to like terms and stuff like that. Stuff you've already done, but just a couple of vocab words first. So we're gonna be learning about polynomials, and poly, obviously means many, but before we define what a polynomial is, we basically need to know what a monomial is. Okay, so mono is one, right? So a monomial, the easy way to say is just kind of like one term. Okay, so a monomial, I'll give you an example, like 3x is an example of a monomial. Okay, you notice it's just like a product of variables and numbers together. I mean, you could have a monomial of those 4, that's a monomial, or 5x squared y to the 100th. That's a monomial. They're just like these single terms, these like groups of numbers and variables that are multiplied. Okay, but you notice in all those terms, there's no pluses or minuses or anything. It's just like this one term, right? So that's a monomial. And a polynomial is like a monomial or a sum or difference of monomials. So you could have like x squared plus 3x plus 2 is a polynomial, and we'll talk about that later. It's called a quadratic trinomial, but we'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk about monomials just for a minute. So monomial in one term, right? We need to be able to, I'm just going to show you real quick. First goal I want you to do is, if you look at a monomial, I want you to be able to tell the degree of it, okay? So let's say I had 3x squared, okay? So if I ask you, okay, what's the degree of this monomial, right? What's the degree of this monomial? All you do is you kind of look for the variables and you look for the exponents of those variables. So this one only has one variable, right? So this monomial has a degree of 2, okay? This monomial has a degree of 2 because the only variable we see is that 2, right? Well, if I did this, now I have a monomial that's 3x squared y. It's still a monomial because it's just one product of numbers and variables, right? So you have this 3x squared y, right? What do you think the degree of this monomial is, okay? Think about it. Well, the degree is, if you add up all the variables there, the degree of this is going to be a 3. So in a monomial, what you do is you basically like add the degrees on the exponents, and that's the degree of the monomial. So this is a monomial with a degree of 3, okay? Even if I had this, I mean 3, that's still a monomial, right? It's one term, right? Just 3, okay? If you think about this, and I ask you what the degree was, the degree is actually 0 on this. And if you think, well, why is it 0, Mr. Winslow? I know there's a 1 right there. Well, when we do the degrees, we're only really counting the degrees of the variables. So if you think about it like this, I mean, you could say like 3x to the 0, something like that. You know what I mean? And that's the same thing. And we know x is 0 is just 1, so that's just 3. So anytime you see, this is called a constant. Okay, this is called a constant because there's no variable, right? This would have a degree of 0. So in a monomial, you basically just add the degrees up. So like if I had like negative 5x to the 5th, y, z to the 6th, okay, and I said, what's the degree of this monomial? Think about it. If you said 12, you were correct, because 6 plus 1 plus 5 is 12, right? So that is a monomial, and that's how you find the degree, okay? So next I want to talk about polynomials, okay? A polynomial is basically a sum or a difference, or you can always say a sum, but basically, yeah, just a sum of monomials. So you know all the quadratics we've been working with, those are all polynomials, okay? So x squared plus 2x plus 1, that is a polynomial. You see it's made up of 1, 2, 3 different terms, right? It's made up of 3 different terms. That's called a polynomial, right? It's a sum. This one in particular is a sum of 3 monomials, right? Okay. So this is a polynomial, okay? And you could have, I mean, 6, 7, 8 terms, 1 term, 2 terms, whatever, right? That's a polynomial, okay? And that's what we're going to be working with over this next several weeks, okay? But today I want to be able to classify a polynomial. So polynomials are classified for two things. They're classified for their degree and the number of terms they have, okay? So, I just want to tell you how to take the degree of a polynomial. We learned from monomial, but if you look at this polynomial, okay, this monomial has a degree of 2. This monomial has a degree of 1. And this monomial has a degree of 0, right? We learned a constant has a degree of 0. So we got a 2, a 1, and a 0. Well, when you take the degree of a polynomial, you don't add all those up. It's different from a monomial. You look for the one that has the highest degree. So we got 2, we got 1, and we got 0. So this polynomial we say has a degree of 2, which we'll learn later makes it a quadratic. And you kind of already know that. But this polynomial has a degree of 2 because the highest term is this one right here with a degree of 2, right? So this has a degree of 2 and it has 3 terms, right? So we're going to learn to name it based on the degree and the number of terms, okay? So I would like to start with the number of terms first, okay? Because that's pretty easy, right? So what do we call a polynomial with one term? We already said it. It's called a monomial, right? It's called a monomial. So this would be a monomial, okay? Well, if I put a second term in there, you're smart kids. What do you think it's called? One terms of monomial. Two is going to be it's called a binomial, okay? And I don't know, I'll just put a +1 back here. 3 terms on a polynomial is called a trinomial. So we got monomial, binomial, and trinomial, right? After that, we're just going to say, okay, this is a polynomial with 4 terms. This is a polynomial with 5 terms, and so on and so forth. So if I put some, you know, I'm kind of OCD, so I'll put an x cubed up here. So if I put like a 3x cubed right here, this is a polynomial with 4 terms. So if it gets above 3, we just say polynomial with 4 terms, 5 terms, and so on and so forth. So monomial, binomial, trinomial, polynomial with 4 terms, polynomial with 5 terms, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the first way we classify a polynomial is by the number of terms it has. Okay. Well, the next way we're going to do it is we're going to classify by the degree. Okay. So we're going to go up through 5, okay? So we're going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and classify those polynomials by those degrees, okay? After 5, we're going to say it has a degree of 6, a degree of 7, a degree of 8, and so on and so forth. But up to 5, we're going to name them, okay? So let's start with a polynomial that has a degree of 0, okay? So this is a polynomial with a degree of 0 because it has no variables, right? So this is a polynomial with a degree of 0. It happens to be a monomial, right? Because it has 1 term, okay? If you have a degree of 0, I want you to write this down. If you have a degree of 0, we call it a constant, okay? And that should make sense to you because if it has no variables, it's constant, right? So any polynomial with a degree of 0, we call it a constant, okay? A constant function. The next one would be a degree of 1. I'll give you an example. Here's a polynomial with a degree of 1. So I had 5x minus 7, okay? This is a binomial, right? It has 2 terms. And since I just have that x right there with a 1, this has a degree of 1, this has a degree of 0. So we say this polynomial has a degree of 1, okay? Well, a polynomial with a degree of 1 we call a linear function, okay? So degree of 0 is constant. Degree of 1 is linear. If you don't know what a degree of 2 is, you might not have done too well on the test because we just took a quadratics test. So a polynomial with a degree of 2, so this is a polynomial with a degree of 2, right? Because 2 is the highest one, right? This is called a quadratic. So this would be called a quadratic trinomial, okay? So we got constant, linear, quadratic. Degree of 3 would be called a cubic, C-U-B-I-C. Degree of 4 is called a quartic polynomial. I'll spell that for you. Quartic polynomial. And then degree of 5 is called a quintic polynomial. So watch this. Constant, linear, quadratic, cubic, quartic, quintic. After we get past 5, we're going to say this is a polynomial with a degree of 6. This is a polynomial with a degree of 7. And it gets kind of boring after that. But we should be able to name a polynomial now based on the number of terms and the degree, right? So let's say I had this. 3 minus 4x to the fourth, right? 3 minus 4x to the fourth. Well, this has two terms, right? So we call it a binomial. And it has a degree of 4, so we call it a quartic binomial. Now, by the way, this is not in what we call standard form. We like it in descending order. So, you know me, I would rather see this like this, right? And we usually like to see them in descending order. I don't know about you. I like my square, you know, ax squared plus bx plus c. That's in descending order, okay? So just keep that in mind. But yeah, that's a quartic binomial, right? Do you guys think you could draw or come up with a cubic trinomial? A cubic trinomial? I'll draw mine. You draw yours. Here's my cubic trinomial, right? It's got a degree of 3 because the largest monomial has a degree of 3, right? And there you go. Okay. So I want you to be able to, if you see a polynomial, you should be able to name it, right? On terms, you got monomial, binomial, trinomial. And then on degrees, you got constant, linear, quadratic, cubic, quartic, quintic, okay? Now, important term, all polynomials have something called a lead coefficient, and it's the numerical factor of the largest degree term. So in this case, it would be 3, right? So the lead coefficient here is 3. Even if I wrote this like this, even if I wrote this in a different order, like this, the lead coefficient is still 3 because it's attached to the largest degree term, okay? So keep that in mind. When they say lead coefficient, it can be misleading, get it? But it's always the one attached to the largest degree term. So the lead coefficient in this cubic trinomial would be 3, okay? In our quadratics, the a would be considered the lead coefficient because you got ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? Well, now that you can classify a polynomial, all we're going to do today is basically add and subtract. So adding and subtracting polynomials is easy. It all boils down to like terms. So I'll just give you a couple examples. 5x squared minus 2x plus 1 minus 3x. Okay, say you had this, right? So I've got a quadratic trinomial minus a quintic binomial, right? So just like any other thing, I mean, if you're subtracting this, you got to distribute the negative. So, I mean, you have like 5x squared minus 2x plus 1 minus 3x to the fifth minus 2, something like that, you see? And all we're going to do is put like terms together. So if you go through this and put like terms together, that negative 3x to the fifth has no like terms, right? So we got negative 3x to the fifth. The next thing you have is that 5x squared, right? So I like mine in descending order, so I put 5x squared. There's nothing that can go with a negative 2x, so that just stays here. And the only like term is that 1 and negative 2, so 1 and negative 2 gives you negative 1. So there's your answer, right? In descending order, you have a polynomial with 4 terms, and it happens to be a quintic, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty easy stuff. It's just like you just got to put the like terms together. The only thing I'll warn you about, if you see something like this, 3x squared. Oh, excuse me. Hold on one second. if you saw something like this, the only thing I would advise you on is anytime you want to add like terms, they not only have to have the same variables, but the same exact exponent. So see this 3x squared y and this 3xy squared, those could not go together, right? So in this particular case, if I wanted to put like terms together, the only like terms would be this 3x squared y and this negative 5x squared y. So 3x squared y and negative 5x squared y, that would be negative 2x squared y. This has no like term, so you say plus 3xy squared, and you put a plus 5 in. That's your resulting polynomial, right? Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy stuff. So my goals for today, I mean, it's pretty easy. Just recognize how to name polynomials on their terms and their degrees, and then add and subtract, and basically just put like terms together. Okay, so on Monday we'll be multiplying a little bit, but today is just adding, subtracting, and naming. Okay, so just a quick review: one term is a monomial, two terms a binomial, three term is a trinomial. 4 terms is a polynomial, 4 terms, polynomial, 5 terms, so on and so forth, right? And then based on degrees, degree of 0 is a constant, degree of 1 is linear, quadratic, cubic, quintic, or quartic, quintics, excuse me, and then degree of 6, degree of 7, so on and so forth, okay? So that's all I got for you today, but you guys try that workout. It should be pretty easy. Like terms, put it together, and then we'll be multiplying and dividing going into next week, okay? So you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.